Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales. Today is brought to you by the letter M. So we're going to talk about movidas, manipulation, main lines. We're going to talk about Mexican Mafia members. We're going to talk about murders, mayhem, and other subjects revolving around prison gangs. In this case, La M. Today, we're going to start off with Armando Mando Macias Torres, who's at a Diamond Bar. Diamond Bar is a pretty nice area. It is located in between Pomona, West Covina, and Anaheim. I show that Mando went to the BOP, which is probably where he was validated. He was born in 1922, so was an older MM member in the 1960s to 70s. That means he was at least 40 years old when he was made. Understand that he was accepted by the Canales at Lompoc and then was released in 1987. Then there's Jimmy Payaso Maciel, who was out of Corona. He had a C number, 40821, and was made MA, I believe, at San Quentin around 1980. He also had family who were MA. I believe he had a primo named Chente, who I'll talk about here in just a minute, who was born almost exactly at the same time he was. Asho Payaso was paroled and then came back with an F as in Frank, number 37563. He was housed at Pelican Bay in 2012. And Asho is not currently in custody. There was Vincent Chente Maciel, and as I previously mentioned, I believe was related to Jimmy Payaso Maciel. I show that Chente was made MA sometime in the 1980s and remained in good standing throughout the 1990s. He was later on moved to Avenal State Prison and is currently housed at the Correctional Training Facility at Soledad. There was Luis Albert, a.k.a. Pelon Maciel, who I understand was more of a lowrider than a gangster. He was involved with Güero Shyrock in multiple crimes, including taxation of barrios in the San Gabriel Valley, as well as organizing a crew to take out two former MA members who were still trying to play that MA card with some people. During this incident, Anthony Dito, a.k.a. Chea Moreno, who hailed from El Monte Hicks, his sister, Maria Moreno, as well as two of Maria's children, 5-year-old Laura Moreno and 6-month-old Ambrose Padilla. Gustavo Tito Aguirre, who was a friend that often did tattoo work there, and I understand was affiliated with 18th Street, was also killed. This is referred to as the Matson Road, not street, Matson Road homicides, which took place in April of 1995. As soon as Jimmy Character Palma got to death row, they killed him. And Pelon didn't trust his sponsor and mentor, Güero Shy, so he locked it up. Luis Pelon Maciel is currently housed at Corcoran and is 54 years old. Then we have Frank Madriaga Macias, also known as Chino, who is out of San Diego National City. I show he actually did some time in Arizona in 1973 through 1974. He then was popped in California for a robbery in 1980, whereby he was given his C number. He paroled in 1984 and then was rearrested and incarcerated at the Duval Vocational Institute around 1987. He then moved to Tehachapi in 1988, I believe at the SHU, when they were locking down prison gang members. So I don't have an exact date, but I highly suspect he was made MA in the late 1980s. He then was moved to Pelican Bay, where he was housed around the year 2000. He was indicted on federal charges under BOP number 72213-198 and did time at Leavenworth in 2003, whereby he immediately took the llaves from Negro Villalba, who had been messing up. Chino was moved to Lewisburg in 2012 and took many photos with fellow MA members and sureños, as seen here. He then was moved to a halfway house in 2022 and released in July of that year. Then there's Martin Madrigal Casares, a.k.a. Maldito, a.k.a. Evil, who's out of Colonia Oxnard Chiques. He was convicted of a robbery in 1989 and given an E number. He then paroled, but caught a parole violation in 1990. He paroled again in 93, but caught another violation soon after, as well as multiple violations in the late 90s. He then was convicted of federal crimes and sent to the BOP, where he was housed at places like Leavenworth in 2003. He was released in 2006, but then busted on Operation Supernova in 2013. I understand that he fled down to Baja and was working for the cartels down there. He had been warned several times by MA members about stepping on toes, but he was a big guy and evidently thought he was safe down in Baja. He thought wrong. He was shot and killed inside a Mexican prison in Baja very recently. As I've said before, I don't talk about current politics. I stay away from that. I think it's actually dangerous that some of these channels are talking about stuff when they don't know what actually happened. They're only guessing, which I feel is very dangerous. And it makes them look bad when it turns out to be nothing close to the truth. I usually only talk about old stuff. There was Frank Kiki Maez, who was out of Primera Flats. He was considered to be an original Mexican Mafia member, and his name appeared on several Mexican Mafia rosters that I've seen in the 1960s. There was Jose Jesus Silent Maldonado, who was out of East Side San Diego. He had a P number, 46937, and was incarcerated in CDC in 1999. He then was housed at Corcoran until recently, and appears to have been released from custody. Let's hope he learned his lesson and doesn't come back. There was Maurice, a.k.a. Marty Monfamo, out of East LA. He had a J number, 91995, and was made MA in the mid-1990s. I show he was released by at least 2012, and I am unsure of his current status. There was Alex Quick Mannon, who was out of Laverne, which is also a relatively nice area, located just north of Pomona. He was locked up in the federal system and was documented Mexican Mafia there in the BOP. He was housed at Lewisburg in 2004, and I show was released in 2006. Then there was Charlie Brown Manriquez. He was considered to be an old-time Emero and was born in 1938. He joined the MA by at least early 1970s at San Quentin and was known as being a very good tattoo artist. At one time, Charlie Brown was in good standing, as seen here, with Gato Martinez, Rube Soto, Topo Peters, Big Mike Mulhern, and Nico Velasquez. He was housed at CIM in 1991, whereby he was hit for refusing to do a hit on another individual ordered by Chuco Castro. It was for this reason, as well as being an advisor to American Me, and for walking around the neighborhood like a bum, that he was killed on March 5th, 1992, by David Smilon Gallardo. He was shot 6 times. There was Robert Taiwa Marin Romero, a.k.a. Romero Reyes, who was out of San Diego National City. He was close to Gato Martinez, as well as Rube Soto, as seen in this old picture. Taiwa ended up running a barbershop in San Diego, which became a headquarters for Mexican Mafia activities. He ended up being prosecuted federally, where he did time with the Canales. He died in December 2016. Jose Chato Mariscal was out of Southside Bakers and had an AK number, 4644. He also ended up doing some federal time and was housed at the ADX. I show he was released from the BOP in August 2010. There was Edward, a.k.a. Eddie Boy, a.k.a. Jughead Marquez, out of Florencia. He had a B number, 28554, and was MA in the 1970s. He was involved with the SPAN program, which was one of many Mexican Mafia control programs, as devised by Cheyenne Cadena and other Mexican Mafia shot callers, which was located at Cal Poly Pomona, whereby many Mexican Mafia affiliated inmates from the California Institution for Men at Chino were pulled out to attend meetings there. This basically was a scam for the Mexican Mafia and an escape risk for officers who had to escort them. There was Jack Eddie Boy Marquez. I'm not sure what barrio he was from, but I've heard his name several times. He had an A number, 93110, was born in 1946. He was MA in the 1970s, and I understand dropped out sometime in the late 1970s. And then we have Javier Gangster Marquez, who was from the Avenues, Drew Street Clique. He was extremely active, as described in a book by Tony Raphael on the Mexican Mafia. Gangster was known for putting in work for the Carnales. Sometimes people say these guys don't have any goals in life. Not true with Gangster. His goal was to become a Mexican Mafia member, and so he put in a lot of work. He killed a couple guys from Well Street who were on the green light list after they killed Tonito, who was a tax collector for the MA. Understand that he was sponsored by Indio from El Sereno and Smokey Sanchez from V&E, as well as Sapo from Rancho San Pedro. An MA member named Boxer Tolento, who was also from the Avs, but 57th Street, protested some of the movidas that Gangster was doing and basically engaged in a smear campaign on him. Gangster then was pretty much in limbo, but he found some paperwork on Boxer where Boxer had testified against somebody, so he turned the tables. He also was in trouble for not taking out Tigre Salinas, who was from the Avenues, who had stepped on way too many toes. so he was stripped by Victor Acuna. But Gangs hung in there and refused to drop out. He continued to strive to maintain his status as an Emmy member and became involved with Tuli Estrada, which, when Tuli fell, that was another thing going against him. But he stayed loyal to the Emmy, even though he was in disregard status for a long time and had multiple keep separates. He was finally cleared, and my understanding is he is in good status still today, where he is housed at Kern Valley State Prison. Then there was Mario Gato Marquez, who was out of Mexico. He had been deported several times and had a C number, 46075, which he acquired for doing robberies in the early 1980s. He also was housed at Richard J. Donovan in 1989. He then was sent to the feds for a short time, I believe due to his border crossing activities, and was released in May 1990. Being that he was 71 years old at the time, it is my belief he is now deceased. There was also Robert Huito Marquez from El Hoyo Maravilla. He was a big dope runner and at one time was close to David Loco Gallegos. But once Loco burned him on a dope deal, he ran him out of Maravilla. Understand that he was housed at the LA County Jail in 1977 and remained active throughout the 1980s, but then later on moved to CMC after he dropped out. There's Ricardo, a.k.a. Rock Marquez, who was the brother of Bat. He was from Del Sol and was at least a camarada, if not an mero. He was involved in gun smuggling across the border in 2003, and the feds indicted him in 2004. There's Jose Alberto Marquez Esqueda, a.k.a. Bat, a.k.a. Dingbat, out of San Diego del Sol. He was affiliated with the MA in the 1980s after he acquired his C number, 51394. He was involved in alien smuggling in the 1980s as well as dope running across the border, whereby he acquired his C number in the early 1980s. He paroled in 1982 but came back on a burglary that year and was housed at CIM. He then moved to San Quentin in 1985 through 1986, which is when I believe he was made MA. He paroled in 1988, but as soon as he hit the street, he got involved in meth, which has been a big problem for most of his life. Bat is known as a tweaker. He got a parole violation in 1991 and was housed at Richard J. Donovan. He then paroled in 1994 and was present at a Mexican Mafia meeting in June of that year. In 1995, he was involved in a plot to kill Donald Littleman Ortiz. He was also busted for dope and a firearm that year, whereby he acquired his H number, 10198. He was housed at Pelican Bay in the late 90s and paroled in the year 2000. At that time, he was heavily involved in narcotic smuggling and ended up being recruited by his San Diego homeboy, David Popeye Barron, to work as an enforcer for the Tijuana cartel, the AFO. He fled to Tijuana. Bat finally ended up being arrested after killing many people for the Arianos. He was housed at Hazleton in 2012 and Miami in 2020. Due to his continued activities, he was moved to the ADX by 2022, where he currently still resides, and is considered one of the top shot callers for the MA and the federal system. I hope you found this episode to be interesting. We're almost halfway through the alphabet. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your support. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.